Commander Jake Sullivan stared at the screen in front of him. The numbers made no sense. 27 massive ships moved through space toward his monitoring station. Each ship was bigger than anything he had ever seen. They were damaged and moving slowly like wounded animals, looking for a safe place to die. Are you seeing this, Lisa? Jake asked his science officer. Dr. Lisa Carter sat at her station, her fingers moving quickly over the controls. Her face was pale and worried. I'm seeing it, but I don't believe it, she said. These ships are using technology that's way beyond anything in our databases. The energy readings are off the charts. Jake looked out the window of his station. In the distance he could see the planet Kepler 442b spinning slowly. It was a peaceful world with human colonies spread across 3 continents. The colonists had no idea that something incredible was heading their way. The first of the strange ships came into clear view. It looked like it was made of metal and something else, something that seemed alive. Parts of the hull moved like breathing. Other sections were torn open, showing the damage from some terrible battle. Commander, I'm getting signals from the ships, said Lieutenant Bob Harris from the communication station. They're not using any language in our systems. The patterns are completely unknown. Jake walked over to look at the communication data. The signals came in waves of light and sound that seemed to follow mathematical patterns. It was beautiful and frightening at the same time. Sir, there's more, Lisa said, her voice tight with worry. I'm detecting life signs on those ships, but they're not like any species we know. The reading suggests silicon-based life forms instead of carbon-based like us and most Federation species. The Federation. Jake felt his stomach tighten when he thought about them. The Galactic Federation controlled most of the known galaxy. They decided which species could join their club and which ones were left out. Humans were members, but just barely. They were always treated like the new kids who didn't quite belong. Commander, incoming message from Federation Command, Bob announced. The main screen changed to show Admiral Helen Brooks, her face stern and cold as always. Commander Sullivan, you are to maintain maximum distance from the unknown vessels, she ordered. Under no circumstances are you to make contact. Federation security fleet is already moving to intercept. These ships carry a dangerous corruption that could spread to other species. What kind of corruption? Jake asked, but the Admiral had already cut the connection. Lisa looked up from her station. Jake, I've been running scans on those ships for the past hour. I'm not detecting any biological weapons or diseases. Whatever the Federation is worried about, it's not something that would hurt us physically. The alien ships continued their slow approach. As they got closer, Jake could see more details. The ships were beautiful in a strange way, like someone had grown them instead of building them. The hull patterns reminded him of tree bark or ocean waves. Sir, the lead ship is changing course, reported navigator Kelly Price. It's heading straight for the planet. Jake made a decision that would change everything. Open a channel to the alien ship, all frequencies but. Sir, the Admiral said. I heard what she said, Jake interrupted. But those ships are clearly in distress. We don't turn our backs on people who need help. That's not what humans do. Bob worked at his station for several minutes. I think I found their frequency, sir. Sending a basic mathematical sequence now. The response came immediately. Lights flashed in. Patterns on the hull of the lead ship. The patterns were complex, but somehow Jake felt he could almost understand them. They're trying to communicate, Lisa said with excitement. The patterns show intelligence, maybe even emotion. Content. They're scared, Jake. Really scared. Over the next few hours, the humans at the station worked to establish basic communication with the alien fleet. They learned that the beings called themselves something that sounded like Vorthai when translated through their computers. They came from the galactic core, from worlds that were ancient when Earth was still young. The Vorthai had been running from something terrible. Their messages, when finally decoded, told of a great change that had come over their species. This change made them different from what they were before. It made them unable to connect with the Federation's psychic network that linked all member species together. That's why the Federation is afraid, Lisa realized. These beings have evolved beyond the psychic control system that keeps the Federation united. They represent change, and change scares those in power. The Federation security fleet arrived 2 days later. 12 massive warships took positions around the alien fleet. The Vorthai ships, already damaged from their long journey, could not fight back. They sent desperate messages, asking for sanctuary, for a safe place to rest and heal. Admiral Brooks contacted Jake again. Commander Sullivan, by order of the Federation Security Council, those ships are to be either captured or destroyed. They pose a threat to galactic stability. What threat? Jake demanded. They're refugees. They're asking for help. They carry a corruption that could spread to other species. They cannot be allowed to make contact with any Federation worlds. Jake looked at his crew. Bob was young, maybe 25, but his face showed the determination of someone much older. Lisa had dedicated her life to understanding other species and helping them. Kelly had family on the planet below. They all knew what the right thing to do was. Admiral, I respectfully declined to follow that order, Jake said. The silence on them communication channels stretched for long seconds. When Brooke spoke again, her voice was like ice. Commander, you are relieved of duty. Prepare to be boarded. Jake cut the connection and turned to his crew. Anyone who wants to leave can take a shuttle to the planet now. I won't order you to stay for what comes next. Nobody moved. Bob smiled and said, where would we go? This is where we belong. Jake activated the emergency channel to the planet below. Governor Pete Morrison appeared on the screen. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes who had helped build the colony from nothing. Pete, I need to ask something big of you and your people, Jake said. He explained about the alien fleet and the Federation's orders. Pete listened without interrupting. When Jake finished, the governor was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. Bring them down. Jake will find room for them somewhere. Pete, this could mean trouble with the Federation. Big trouble, son. I've been dealing with bullies my whole life, Pete said with a grin. The Federation might be bigger than most, but bullies are all the same. You can't let them push around people who can't fight back. Jake sent the landing coordinates to the Vorthai fleet. The alien ships began their descent to the planet's surface, moving slowly and carefully. As they entered the atmosphere, Jake could see them more clearly. They were even more beautiful than he had imagined, like living works of art painted across the sky. Federation warships moved to intercept. But Jake did something unexpected. He positioned his small monitoring station between the warships and the descending aliens. It was a tiny gesture, like a mouse standing up to a pack of wolves. But sometimes the smallest gestures mean the most. "This is your final warning," Commander Brooks transmitted. "Move aside or we will fire through you." Jake looked at his crew one more time. They all nodded. "Negative, Admiral. Vori are under human protection now." The first alien ship touched down in a field outside the main colony. As it settled to the ground, Jake realized that everything had changed. Humanity had just made its choice. They would stand with the outcasts no matter what it cost them. The universe was about to turn its back on the human race, but Jake Sullivan had never felt prouder to be human. The Federation's answer came faster than anyone expected. 3 weeks after the Vorthai ships landed on Kepler 442b, every human ship in space received the same message. All trade agreements were canceled. All diplomatic relations were cut off. No human vessel would be allowed to dock at any Federation port. Captain Roy Henderson learned this the hard way. His cargo ship Prairie Wind carried medical supplies that Earth desperately needed. He had been trading the same route for 15 years without any problems. When he approached the Federation space station at Riel 7, the docking controllers refused to answer his calls. "This is Prairie Wind requesting docking permission," Roy said into his radio for the 10th time. "I have emergency medical supplies for Earth colonies." The response came from Admiral Brooks herself. "Captain Henderson, your vessel is forbidden from entering Federation space. Turn around immediately or you will be fired upon." Roy stared at the radio in shock. "Admiral, these are medical supplies. People will die without them. That is no longer our concern, and humanity has made its choice." Roy tried to find another route home, but every Federation world had the same orders. Human ships were not welcome anywhere. When he tried to pass through the Century system, Federation patrol ships opened fire on his cargo vessel. Roy barely escaped with his life. Back on Kepler 442b, the situation was getting harder every day. The colony had been built to support 50,000 humans. Now they had to care for nearly 20,000 Vorthai refugees as well. Food was running low. Power systems were overloaded. The colonists were scared and angry. Dr. Lisa Carter worked day and night trying to understand their new neighbors. The Vorthai were unlike anything she had ever studied. They were tall, maybe 8 ft on average, with bodies that seemed to be made of living crystal and metal. They moved gracefully but spoke in patterns of light that hurt human eyes to look at directly. The Vorthai leader was an ancient being that the humans started calling Victor because his real name was impossible for human tongues to pronounce. Victor was patient with the humans, but Lisa could see the sadness in the way his crystal body dimmed when he thought no one was watching. "They're dying," Lisa told Governor P. Morrison during one of their daily meetings, "not from disease or injury, but from something deeper. It's like they're cut off from something they need to survive." Pete looked tired. He had been dealing with angry colonists all day. Dale McKenna, who owned the biggest ranch on the planet, had been leading protests against the aliens. "We need to send them away," Dale had argued at the Morningtown meeting. Look what helping them has cost us. The Federation has cut us off from everything we can't get. Supplies we can't trade, we can't even send messages to our families on other worlds. Many colonists agreed with Dale. They were good people, but they were scared. Their children asked why they couldn't talk to their grandparents on Earth anymore. Their businesses were failing without trade from other worlds. Some families were already packing to leave the planet, but there were others who disagreed. Mary Phillips taught at the colony school. She had seen the Vorthai children, the small ones they called seedlings. The young aliens were frightened and confused, just like human children would be in the same situation. They're just scared, Mary told anyone who would listen. They didn't choose to be refugees. They're running from something terrible. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning. Mary was walking near the temporary shelters where the Vorthai were staying when she heard screaming from the direction of the water treatment plant. She ran toward the sound and found a crowd gathered around the main reservoir. Little Amy Johnson, only 6 years old, had fallen into the water while playing too close to the edge. The current was strong and Amy couldn't swim well enough to fight it. Her mother, Jenny, was screaming for help, but the water was too deep and fast for the adults to reach her in time. Without warning, one of the young Vorthai moved, the being that the humans had named Harvey Dove, into the water with incredible speed. His crystal body moved through the water like he was born for it. He reached Amy just as she was going under for the third time. Harvey lifted the little girl above his head and carried her to safety. When he placed her gently on the shore, Amy looked up at the strange alien face above her. Instead of being scared, she smiled and said, "Thank you." Harvey's body flashed with soft blue light. Even though humans couldn't understand Vorthai language, everyone knew he was saying, "You're welcome." The crowd stood in silence for a moment. Then Jenny Johnson stepped forward and hugged the young alien. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving my daughter." Word of Harvey's rescue spread through the colony within hours. People who had never spoken to a Vorthai before started bringing them food and water. Children who had been taught to stay away from the aliens began playing simple games with the seedlings. Dr. Carter used the changing mood to push forward with her research. She discovered that the Vorthai were not just silicon-based life forms, but something far more complex. They were beings that existed partially in normal space and partially in what humans would call psychic space. That's why they're dying, she explained to Jake Sullivan, who had come down to the planet after his monitoring station was destroyed by Federation forces. They used to be connected to a galaxy-wide psychic network. Something changed in their minds that cut them off from that network. It's like they're suffocating, but in a way we can barely understand. Jake studied the data Lisa had gathered. What kind of change could do this to an entire species? "I think it was evolution," Lisa said quietly. "They evolved beyond the network. Somehow, maybe they grew too advanced for it, or maybe they developed immunity to it. Either way, the Federation sees them as a threat." Jake nodded, because if other species can evolve the same way, the Federation loses control over them. Their conversation was interrupted by alarms from the colony's defense systems. Federation ships had appeared in orbit around the planet. Jake counted At least 30 vessels, including several heavy cruisers. Admiral Brooks sent a message to the entire planet. Citizens of Kepler 442b, you have 24 hours to surrender the alien refugees to Federation custody. If you refuse, this colony will be classified as a rogue settlement and dealt with accordingly. Governor Morrison called an emergency meeting. The colonists packed into the town hall, arguing loudly about what to do. Some wanted to give up the Vorthai to save themselves. Others refused to abandon the aliens who had become their neighbors. The debate went on for hours. Finally, old Pete Morrison stood up. The room grew quiet because everyone respected the governor, even those who disagreed with him. I've lived a long time, Pete said. I've seen good people do bad things because they were scared. I've seen bad people do good things because someone showed them a better way. Today we have to choose who we want to be. He pointed toward the Y temporary shelters where the Vorthai were waiting. Those beings came to us for help. They didn't demand anything. They didn't threaten us. They just asked for a safe place to rest. When one of our children was in danger, they risked their own lives to save her. Pete looked around the room at the faces of his people. The Federation says we have to choose between our safety and doing what's right. Maybe that's true. Maybe helping the Vorthai will bring trouble down on our heads, but I'd rather face the trouble knowing I stood up for what I believe in than live safe knowing I turned my back on people who needed help. The vote wasn't even close. By margin of 3-1, the colonists decided to protect their alien guests. Dale McKenna and his supporters weren't happy, but they accepted the decision. That night, Jake Sullivan stood on a hill overlooking the colony. The Vorthai shelters glowed with soft light patterns that he was starting to understand meant contentment and gratitude. In the distance, Federation ships waited like hawks circling their prey. Jake knew that tomorrow would bring violence. The Federation wouldn't accept the colony's defiance quietly. But tonight, humans and aliens worked together to prepare their defenses. Children played games that mixed human rules with Vorthai light patterns. Adults shared food and stories despite not speaking the same language. The universe had turned its back on both species, but they had found each other. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The first Federation attack came at dawn. Jake Sullivan watched from the colony's command center as 12 Federation fighters screamed down through the atmosphere. Their plan was simple: destroy the Vorthai shelters and force the aliens to surrender. But the Federation pilots had not expected what they found waiting for them. 3 months of working together had changed both humans and Vorthai in ways no one had predicted. Sam Rodriguez, the colony's chief engineer, had discovered something amazing about Vorthai technology. The alien ships were not just machines. They were alive, grown rather than built, and they responded to thoughts and feelings as much as to controls. It's like the ship can read my mind, Sam had told Jake a week earlier. When I think about where I want to go, the controls seem to move by themselves. When I feel scared, the shields get stronger. It's incredible. The Vorthai had been just as surprised by human abilities. Their leader Victor had explained through the light pattern language they were all learning that humans could do something the Vorthai had lost when they changed. Humans could think in ways that were not logical, could make leaps of understanding that skipped over normal reasoning. Your minds are wild, Victor had communicated. To Dr. Lisa Carter, our minds became too ordered, too connected to the great network. We lost the ability to think new thoughts, but you humans, you can see solutions we cannot imagine. Now, as Federation fighters dove toward the colony, this strange partnership was put to its first real test. Sam Rodriguez sat in the pilot seat of a Vorthai fighter that had been damaged in their flight from the Galactic Core. The ship had been too hurt to fly, but Sam had found a way to fix it by thinking about healing instead of just repairing. Living metal had grown back together under his touch. This is Prairie Wind. Calling all defenders, came Roy Henderson's voice over the radio. The cargo ship captain had finally made it back to the colony, his ship loaded with volunteers from other human worlds who had heard about the fight against the Federation. Roy, good to have you back, Jake replied from the command center. What's your situation? I've got 36 volunteers and a hold full of weapons that some very generous people donated to our cause, Roy said. Oh, and I brought a friend on our Jake's screen. A massive shape appeared behind Roy's cargo ship. It was one of the damaged Vorthai vessels, but something was different about it. Parts of the ship glowed with new energy. Human additions had been grafted onto the living hull, creating something that had never existed before. That's the hope of two worlds. Sam's voice crackled over the radio as his hybrid fighter climbed to meet the Federation attack. We've been working on her for 2 months. She's part human engineering, part Vorthai biotechnology, and all kinds of impossible. The Federation pilots had trained to fight human ships or alien vessels, but they had never seen anything like what rose to meet them that morning. Sam's fighter moved like it was alive, dodging energy blasts with grace no purely mechanical ship could match, but it also used human tactics, sudden changes in direction, and aggressive attacks that confused the Federation pilots. The battle was short but fierce. Sam's hybrid fighter danced through the enemy formation, his human instincts guiding Vori technology in ways that surprised everyone, including Sam himself. The hope of two worlds used weapons that seemed to grow from its hull, firing energy bursts that adjusted their power based on what the ship somehow knew about the targets. When the smoke cleared, 8 Federation fighters were destroyed or damaged beyond repair. The others retreated to orbit, carrying news of this impossible new technology back to their commanders. Well, that got their attention, Jake said as he watched the retreating ships on his screen. Down in the colony, people cheered and celebrated the victory, but Jake knew this was just the beginning. The Federation would be back, and next time they would bring much more firepower. Over the following weeks, more human ships arrived at Kepler 442b, not just from Earth but from colonies throughout human space. Captains like Tony Martinez brought news that other worlds were beginning to question Federation authority. Some had even started asking for Vorthai refugees of their own. It's spreading, Tony told Jake during a meeting in the colony's rebuilt command center. People are hearing about what you did here, and they're starting to ask questions. Why is the Federation so afraid of these aliens? What are they hiding? Dr. Carter had been working with Victor and other Vorthai elders to find answers to those very questions. What they discovered changed everything. Jake, You need to see this, Lisa called him. To her laboratory one evening, she had been studying data recovered from the damaged Vorthai ships, trying to understand what had forced them to flee their home worlds. On her screen was a map of the galaxy, red dots marked worlds throughout Federation space. Hundreds of them, each dot represented a world where entire civilizations had simply vanished. The Vorthai call them the Devourers, Lisa explained. They're not from our galaxy, they came from somewhere else, somewhere dark and empty. They don't destroy worlds, they consume them. They eat the life force of entire planets, leaving nothing but empty husks behind. Jake stared at the map in a horror. How long has this been going on? According to Victor, for at least 1,000 years, maybe longer. The Federation has been hiding it, covering it up, pretending the lost worlds were victims of natural disasters or civil wars. But why would they do that? Victor himself answered, his crystalline form glowing with patterns that Jake was learning to read as deep sadness. Because the Devourers do not attack randomly, they use the network that connects all Federation species. They follow the psychic pathways between worlds. The Federation knows this, but they cannot give up the network without losing their power over the galaxy. Lisa nodded. That's why the Vorthai changed. Their species evolved to break free from the network, to become immune to the Devourer influence. But the Federation sees this as a threat to their control, not a solution to the invasion. The truth was worse than Jake had imagined. The Federation wasn't just hiding the Devourer threat, they were actively fighting against the only defense against it. By trying to destroy the transformed Vorthai, they were dooming the entire galaxy. We have to tell people, Jake said. Every species in the galaxy needs to know about this. The Federation will never allow it, Lisa replied. They'll destroy anyone who tries to spread this information. Jake looked out the window at the colony. Below, human children played with Vorthai seedlings in the streets. Engineers worked alongside crystal beings to repair ships and build new defenses. For the first time in galactic history, two completely different species were truly working together as equals. Then we'll have to make sure we're too strong for them to destroy, he said. The next phase of the plan began immediately, using the knowledge gained from their partnership with the Vorthai. Human engineers started building ships unlike anything ever seen. These vessels combined the best of both technologies, creating fighters and cruisers that were part machine, part living organism. Captain Steve Parker was one of the first to volunteer for the new hybrid ship program. His vessel, the Defiant Spirit, was a marvel of combined engineering. The ship could repair itself during battle, adapt its weapons to any threat, and respond to its pilot's thoughts and emotions. It's like having a conversation with your ship. Steve told other pilots. She knows what I need before I do. When I feel angry, she hits harder. When I feel protective, her shields get stronger. It's not like flying a machine, it's like dancing with a partner. Word of the new technology spread through the human colonies faster than the Federation could contain it. Independent traders carried news, and sometimes refugees from one world to another. Slowly, more species began to ask questions about the Federation's policies. The Cathara clans were the first to openly break with the Federation. Their leader, a proud warrior named Thector, declared that his People would no longer follow Federation orders blindly. 3 weeks later, the first Kithra ships arrived at Kepler 442b, requesting permission to undergo the Vorthite transformation process. "We have heard the truth," Tyr told Jake and Victor during their first meeting. "Our worlds have lost ships to mysterious disappearances for generations. If there is a way to fight back against this hidden enemy, the Cathara will take that path no matter the cost." But the Federation was not idle during this time. Admiral Brooks had been building a massive fleet in secret, drawing ships from every corner of Federation space. Her orders were clear: destroy the rebel colony and all hybrid technology before it could spread further. The final battle was coming, and Jake knew that. Everything they had built together was about to be put to the ultimate test. The hybrid ships were powerful, but they were still outnumbered 10-1. Victory would require more than just superior technology. It would require the kind of cooperation and trust that only desperate people fighting for their survival could achieve. As Federation war fleets gathered at the edge of the system, Jake stood with Victor on the observation deck of their command ship. Around them, humans and Vorthite worked together to prepare for the fight of their lives. "Whatever happens," Jake said to his alien friend, "we face it together." The evidence was worse than anyone had imagined. Captain Tony Martinez had just returned from a scouting mission to the galactic rim, and the images he brought back made everyone in the command center sick to their stomachs. "This used to be the Altari home world," Tony said as he showed the recordings on the main screen. The planet looked normal from space, but when the camera zoomed in, the truth became clear. Cities stood empty, forests were gray and lifeless. Nothing moved anywhere on the surface. Population was 8 billion when I last visited 3 years ago, Tony continued. Now there's nothing, no life signs at all. It's like someone just sucked all the life out of the entire planet. Dr. Lisa Carter studied the readings from Tony's ship. The planet is still there, the buildings are still standing, but everything that was alive is gone. This matches what Victor told us about Devourer attacks. Jake Sullivan felt cold as he looked at the dead world on the screen. "How many worlds like this have you found?" 17 so far, Tony replied. "All in Federation space, all reported as lost to natural disasters or civil wars, but there's no sign of any fighting, no evidence of earthquakes or storms, just empty worlds with all the life drained away." The truth about the Devourers was spreading despite the Federation's attempts to stop it. President Nancy Coleman of the Human Colonial Authority had made the difficult decision to share the information with other independent species. It was a risk that could make humanity an even bigger target, but she knew that fighting the Devourers would require all the help they could get. "We can't win this alone," Nancy had told Jake during their last secure communication. "If these Devourers have been feeding on our galaxy for 1,000 years, they're too strong for any one species to stop. We need allies, and we need them now." Dr. Carter led a diplomatic mission to Haven's Rest, a neutral trading post, where representatives from dozens of species gathered to do business away from Federation control. The space station was one of the few places where different civilizations could meet without Federation oversight. The meeting room was crowded with beings from across the galaxy. The Kithra delegation sat with their warrior priest Fear while the insect-like Chitani hive. Speakers clicked and buzzed in their own language, even the mysterious void. Runners who rarely spoke to anyone had sent a representative. Friends Lisa began using the universal translator to speak to the gathered aliens. We come to you with terrible news and a desperate request for help. She activated a holographic display showing the evidence they had gathered, images of dead worlds, Federation communications, discussing the cover-up, and recordings of Vorthai elders explaining the devourer threat filled the air above the conference table. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Several delegations started arguing loudly in their native languages. The Satani representatives' antennae twitched with agitation, while the Borlani ambassadors first stood on end with fear. You're saying the Federation has known about this for centuries and done nothing? Demanded Krelvar, the Borlani trade minister. Worse than nothing, Lisa replied. They've been actively preventing species from developing defenses against the devourers. They've been sacrificing entire worlds to maintain their political control. The meeting continued for hours. Some species refused to believe the evidence, claiming it was human propaganda designed to break up the Federation. Others were convinced, but too afraid to act. But several delegations, including the Cathar clans and the Borlani Confederacy, agreed to join the growing alliance against both the Federation and the Devourers. While Lisa worked on gathering allies, Captain Steve Parker led joint human Vorthai task forces on dangerous missions throughout the galaxy. Their job was to investigate the Federation's deepest secrets and gather proof of Devourer infiltration. Steve's ship, the Defiant Spirit, had been modified with the latest hybrid technology. The vessel could slip past Federation sensors by mimicking the bio signatures of normal space debris. This allowed his team to reach places no traditional ship could go. Their most dangerous mission took them to the Omega sector, a region of space that the Federation had declared off limits to all civilian traffic. According to official records, the area contained dangerous space storms and unstable stars. The truth was much worse. Dear God, whispered Lieutenant Carol Adams, Steve's science officer, as they emerged from hyperspace near the first target world. Steve, you need to see this. The planet below them had once been home to the Zelani, a peaceful species known for their beautiful crystal cities. Now, those cities stood empty and dark, but that wasn't the worst part. Floating in orbit around the dead world were massive ships unlike anything in Federation databases. The Devourer vessels were organic, like diseased whale carcasses. Drifting through space, they pulsed with sickly green light and trailed tendrils of energy that reached down to the planet's surface. Even from a distance, Steve could feel something wrong about those ships, something that made his skin crawl and his thoughts feel fuzzy. They're still here, Carol said, her voice shaking. The Devourers are still feeding on whatever's left of that world. Steve activated the ship's stealth systems and began recording everything they could see. The Devourer vessels were connected to each other by streams of energy that formed complex patterns across the star system. At the center of the pattern was something that hurt to look at directly, a swirling mass of darkness that seemed to eat light itself. That's their nest, came Victor's voice from the ship's communication system. The Vorthai elder had insisted on joining the mission despite the danger, that is, where they bring the life energy they steal, where they grow new ships and new hunters. The team spent 3 days in the Omega sector, visiting system after system and documenting the horror they found. Dozens of worlds had been completely drained of life. Devourer ships patrolled the empty systems like sharks in dead water, and at the heart of it all was a massive structure that seemed to be part ship, part space station, and part living nightmare. It's a breeding ground, Victor explained. As they prepared to leave the sector, the Devourers used the stolen life energy to create more of their kind. Every world they destroy makes them stronger. When Steve's team returned to Kepler 442b, they brought with them the most disturbing discovery of all, hidden in the data streams connecting the Devourer ships. They had found Federation communication codes. The Federation isn't just covering up the Devourer attacks, Lisa realized as she studied the data. They're coordinating with them. They're helping the Devourers choose their targets. Jake felt sick as the implications became clear. They're feeding other species to the Devourers to protect themselves. Worse than that, Victor added, his crystal form dim with sadness. They are using the great network to guide the Devourers to worlds that question Federation authority. Any species that speaks against them becomes food for the enemy. The revelation split the galaxy even further when word leaked out about Federation collaboration with the Devourers. Riots broke out on dozens of worlds. Some species tried to cut themselves off from the psychic network, but withdrawal from the system was difficult and often deadly for civilizations that had been connected for generations. On Kepler 442b, the transformation process had become safer and more reliable thanks to months of careful study by human and Vorthai scientists working together. But it was still dangerous, and not everyone who attempted it survived. The process required individuals to fundamentally change how their minds worked, breaking free from psychic connections that had shaped their species for thousands of years. The first Kithra volunteers began the transformation on a cold Tuesday morning. Thier himself was among them, determined to lead his people by example. The process took place in special chambers grown by Vorthai biotechnology, organic pods that helped guide the mental changes safely. It feels like dying and being reborn, Diktar said when he emerged from his transformation pod 3 days later. His eyes were different now, more alert and independent. I can no longer hear the voices of my ancestors through the network, but I can think thoughts that are truly my own. The transformed Cathar warriors were immune to Devourer influence, but they paid a price for their freedom. They could no longer communicate with unchanged members of their species. Through the psychic network, families were split apart as some chose transformation while others were too afraid to risk the process. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as more species learned about the transformation option. The Borlani sent their bravest scientists and soldiers. The Chitani hives debated for weeks before sending a small group of volunteers. Even some Federation species began secretly requesting information about the process, but the Federation's response was swift and brutal. Admiral Brooks declared any species attempting transformation to be in rebellion against galactic law. Federation fleets attacked worlds that had requested help, claiming they were stopping the spread of a dangerous mental disease. The battle for Titi became a turning point. In the growing war, Captain Steve Parker led a defense fleet of hybrid ships to protect the human research colony there. When Federation forces arrived in overwhelming numbers, the journey to the galactic core took 3 months and cost more lives than Jake Sullivan wanted to count. The combined fleet of humans, Vorthai, and allied species had grown to over 200 ships, but they faced obstacles that no military force had ever encountered before. The closer they got to the center of the galaxy, the stronger the psychic network became. Ships with unchanged crews began experiencing strange problems. Pilots would suddenly change course without explanation. Weapon systems would refuse to fire on Federation targets. Some vessels simply stopped responding to orders entirely. It's like the network is fighting back, Dr. Lisa Carter explained during a strategy meeting aboard the flagship Unity. The ship itself was a marvel of cooperation, grown from Vorthai biotechnology, but enhanced with human engineering and crewed by transformed members of a dozen different species. The psychic web gets thicker as we approach the core worlds, Victor added, his crystal form dim with exhaustion. Even we transformed ones can feel its pull. It whispers promises of peace and unity if we would only surrender to its control. Jake studied the tactical displays showing their fleet progress. They had already lost 15 ships to the network's influence. Entire crews had simply abandoned their posts and flown their vessels toward Federation space, claiming they had remembered their duty to galactic peace. How much further, he asked Victor. 2 weeks to reach the core system itself. But the final approach will be the most dangerous. The network's power there is so strong that even transformed minds may not be able to resist it completely. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mary Phillips, the former school teacher who had befriended the Vorthai children, had been working with the youngest members of both species. Throughout the journey, the children, both human and Vorthai, seemed less affected by the network's influence than adults. They're different, Mary explained to Jake and Lisa. The human children who grew up around the Vorthai, and the Vorthai seedlings who learned from human kids, they think in ways that neither species has ever thought before. They're naturally immune to the network because their minds developed outside of it. Jake looked at the group of children Mary had brought to the meeting. They ranged in age from 8 to 16, humans and Vorthai, playing and learning together as if they had always been one people. Little Amy Johnson, the girl Harvey had saved from drowning, was teaching a young Vorthai how to play a human game. Meanwhile, the alien child was showing Amy how to create light patterns that told stories. They could guide us through the network. Lisa realized their minds could help shield the fleet from the psychic influence. It was a desperate plan, using children to navigate the most dangerous part of their mission. But as they approached the core worlds, it became clear that it was their only chance of success. The Federation's last stand took place in the galactic heart system, where the original psychic network had been built millions of years ago. The system contained 13 worlds, each one a massive city planet covered in crystalline structures that amplified and controlled psychic energy. Admiral Brooks commanded a fleet of over 500 ships, the largest military force ever assembled. But as Jake's fleet approached the system, they discovered something that changed everything. Those aren't all Federation ships. Captain Steve Parker reported from his scout vessel. I'm reading energy signatures that match the Devourer vessels we found in the Omega sector. Jake felt his blood turn cold as the truth became clear. The Federation wasn't just working with the Devourers anymore. They had become Devourers themselves, or at least something very much like them. The transformation works both ways, Victor explained sadly. Just as we can evolve beyond the network's control, other species can evolve deeper into it. The Federation leadership has changed themselves so completely that they are no longer truly alive in any way we would understand. The final battle began when Jake's fleet entered the outer edge of the galactic heart system. But this wasn't a normal space battle. The weapons fired energy and matter, but they also attacked minds and souls. Federation ships tried to overwhelm the Allied fleet with psychic broadcasts that promised peace and unity. In exchange for surrender, the children saved them, working together in the Unity's command center. Human and Vor, the young people, created a mental shield that protected the entire fleet. Their innocent minds, shaped by friendship instead of politics, proved immune to the network's corruption. All ships advanced to the second planet. Jake ordered. Intelligence reports suggested that the main network control center was located there, hidden beneath layers of crystalline amplifiers that had been built over millions of years. Fighting was fierce and strange. Ships merged and separated like living creatures. Energy weapons fired beams that could pass through normal matter, but struck directly at the life force of their targets. Some vessels simply vanished when their crews chose to abandon physical existence and merge with the network itself. Captain Tony Martinez led a strike force down to the second planet's surface while the main fleet engaged the Federation defenders in orbit. What his team found in the underground chambers changed everything they thought they knew about the galaxy's history. Jake, you need to see this. Tony's voice crackled over the communication system. The Devourers aren't invaders from outside our galaxy. They're what's left of the first species to build the psychic network. The recordings Tony sent back showed vast chambers filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with sickly light, but these weren't machines or even biotechnology. They were the remains of living beings, species that had existed millions of years ago and had been slowly consumed by their own creation. The network was supposed to bring peace and unity, Victor said as he studied the data, but instead it became a parasite that fed on the life force of its creators. The Devourers are what remains when a species gives up all individual thought and becomes nothing but food for the network. Dr. Carter worked frantically to understand the network's control systems. If they could shut it down, they might be able to free the galaxy from both Federation control and Devourer influence. But the systems were incredibly complex, grown and evolved over millions of years. I can't figure this out, she admitted after hours of study. It's like trying to perform surgery on a living god. That's when Victor made his decision. The ancient Vor, the elder, had been growing weaker throughout the journey, his transformed mind struggling against the network's pull. Now he stepped forward with grim determination. I know what must be done, he said. My people were connected to this network for thousands of years before our transformation. Part of me remembers the old pathways, the original control codes. I can sever the connections, but the process will destroy me. Jake wanted to find another way, but there was no time. Federation forces were breaking through the fleet. Defenses, devourer ships were approaching from deeper in the system. If they didn't act now, everything they had fought for would be lost. Victor entered the central control chamber. Alone, his crystal form began to glow, brighter and brighter as he connected his mind to the ancient network. Through the ship's sensors, Jake watched as the old alien sacrificed himself to free an entire galaxy. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the galaxy, the psychic network that had controlled civilization for millions of years simply stopped working. On thousands of world species that had been enslaved by the Federation's mental control suddenly found themselves free to think their own thoughts. The devourer ships, cut off from the network that fed them, began to collapse in on themselves. Without the constant flow of psychic energy, they couldn't maintain their unnatural existence. One by one, they crumbled into dust and drifted away on the solar wind. The Federation fleet tried to continue fighting, but their crews were in chaos. Many had never learned to think independently, and without the network to guide them, they couldn't function as a military force. Ships collided with each other or simply drifted aimlessly through space. In the months that followed, Jake found himself helping to rebuild galactic civilization from the ground up. The old Federation was gone, replaced by a loose confederation of free worlds that worked together by choice rather than psychic compulsion. Governor Pete Morrison, now serving as Earth's representative to the new Galactic Council, summed up the situation perfectly during one of their meetings. "It's messy," he said with a grin. "Folks are arguing and disagreeing about everything. Some species want to go their own way entirely. Others are trying to form new alliances. But you know what? That's what freedom looks like. It's not neat and orderly like the old system, but it's real." Dr. Lisa Carter established the first Transformation Research Center on Earth, helping species that wanted to evolve beyond their old psychic dependencies. The process was still dangerous, but it was no longer the desperate gamble it had been during the war. Jake often visited the memorial they had built for Victor and the others who died in the final battle. The monument was made from both human, metal, and Vori crystal, symbolizing the partnership that had saved the galaxy. Sometimes he would find children there, both human and alien, playing the same games that Mary Phillips had taught them during the long journey to the galactic core.